Hi, this is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So what I'm going to do today to start out the show is I'm going to mix the analysis with a lesson. I want to show an example on Apple of how to get in an ongoing trend using a simple RSI tool. All right. And then what we're going to do is show how we want to watch what's taking place in Tesla for a potential entry using the same sort of strategy. All right. So once we go through that, we'll go through the symbol requests that came through. I'm going to talk about the market and some sector stuff, but let's go ahead and get going with this lesson. Okay, so I'm going to use the chart of Apple to just give you an example of how I think you can get in something that's starting to show real strength, but use a simple method to enter, all right? And so the way I have this set up, I've got the monthly in the bottom left with the MACD and the ADX, okay, and the scales below. I've got the weekly with the same look, MACD and ADX, and then the daily up here with the MACD and the ADX. But over on the left, I've got a daily chart with the RSIs. Now, the RSI 20 is this red line, all right, and then the RSI 5 is the gray one. What we're going to do is use the red line to help us determine whether we have a new trend in place. And we're going to use the gray line to help us with overbought and oversold. All right. So first of all, let me just sort of set the stage here. We have a move to the upside. The stock gets really nice reaction to earnings. It comes up through the 18 and the 40, kind of makes a double bottom. It did undercut this a little bit. But no real strength on the sell side as we drop down. And then we found support right at the 18-month line and make a big double bottom above the zero line on the monthly chart. And if you notice on the monthly as well, the red line never overtook the green line. That means the buyers maintain control. So just keep something in mind. If the buyers in green are on top and they start going through a correction and the sellers start showing strength, if red never truly overtakes the green, if the sellers never really overtake the buyers, then we know that the buyers are still in command. That's really important to me when we go through a long correction and a long consolidation pattern, all right? But what I want to do now is sort of focus in and say, I know I've got this stock moving up. I know they've got earnings coming, an earnings beat, and stock's acting really well. Do I just jump on board because it looks like things are starting to emerge here? We're starting to show strength. Do I just jump on board? Well, I don't do that. What I do when I really want to enter something, and I know it's showing a lot of strength, underlying strength for the first time in a while. And it's a stock that's pretty widely followed, say. I probably want to be a little bit more aggressive with my entry so I don't miss it, if I like the overall pattern and how it's developing. All right. Now, one of the ways you can do that is when we go down to this daily chart, we know we have a trend in place. What you can do is look for this specific RSI signal. All right. That's where the 20 RSI, which again is acting as the trend indicator. So we're using the 50 line to kind of determine the trend in a way, because if the red line stays above 50 through a pullback, then we know that we have a pretty good chance that there's an emerging trend developing. If you notice, when we turn down here, we failed at 50. Every rally, the red line failed at 50 every single time until we started to get above it here on earnings. Now it's holding 50 on pullbacks. And how do I know I have a pullback? Well, I'm using the RSI 5 for that. The RSI 5 dips down under 50. Right? And the RSI 20 stays above. So when I see this dropping down underneath on a closing basis, and I know that I have basically what I call an RSI setup, where RSI 20, the trend indicator, is above 50, showing there's enough strength in the trend, and the RSI 5 dips down below 50. Now, one thing I want to point out, when we have a trend, which is where it started on earnings, this is where the trend started, you're not going to get oversold readings. If you're waiting for even a short-term RSI 5 to come down oversold, you're going to miss, you're not going to ever really get an entry. Or rarely where you get an entry. Almost always, the only time you're going to see this kind of a drop is when the market really gets hit and it causes everything to drop. All right. So be more inclined, I would be more inclined to be watching for these 50 pullbacks. And if you notice, we got 3 of them since that breakout in the earnings, since the earnings news. We made a move up, we got it pull back here, we got another one here, and then we got a third one here. So all 3 of these are potential entry points in a stock that you want to get in because you like what's taking place. Maybe you like the fundamentals, maybe you think there's a bigger picture pattern developing, and you're looking for an entry. These are little quick dips without a lot of, there shouldn't be a whole lot of analysis in this. Now, one thing I'll tell you is if I see divergence in the red line, then I don't necessarily want to play. So if you notice what's happening right now, we're making a higher high here, and this red line is actually making, the first time in the move, it's making a lower high. You see how these are all been higher highs? Now we're above 70 and we're making a lower high. This gets me a little bit nervous. I probably would not play the next pullback, even if it shows up like this and we get the RSI buy. I probably wouldn't do that. I would be more inclined to say, okay, I had 3 opportunities, all right? And now the next pullback will probably be something a little bit more, that maybe takes a little bit more time or something like that. So just kind of be aware of that. Once we get above 70 and we show signs of divergence in the RSI 20, I would start to shy away from those signals until we get a better correction or consolidation pattern. All right. But this can be really helpful. So let's go and look at a present move right now. Let's look at Tesla. All right. Similar situation. And the reason why I say that is Apple was showing these signs before it broke out. All right. It hadn't announced all its stuff about the AI, which really got it going on Apple. This one is doing the same thing. It's sort of breaking the downtrend line, but it hasn't taken out this big 300 number. 300 was key here. 300 was key again here. It's kind of a key level to watch, but based on the strength of this move, and we have the 18-month rising now underneath, look at the big green bar here. Look at the one thing I like to show, and I have my subscribers, we talk about this all the time. These big green bars with big volume, really important, and that's often the volume will be correlated with DI. DI is breaking out. These are all really good signs for Tesla. All right. And this is happening on a weekly chart. I know we already had a daily breakout, but I'm looking for those bigger picture patterns. As you guys know, I work with a lot of institutions. I'm always trying to determine if something big is going to develop, not just a trading play, but something that has some legs to it that could last a while. Like when I highlighted this in my reports back in 2020, this pullback here, that's the type of thing I'm on the lookout for. And we're starting to get something really interesting develop in Tesla right now. So what we're looking for now is look at what's taking place on this RSI. So we're breaking out. We got a really strong reading in the RSI 20, but what we need is a little dip. We need this to dip down. Now it looks like it's up at almost 100. I've never seen, it's very rare to see it this high, or even on RSI 5 on a daily, but we're going to want to see this dip down closer to 50. And that'll be the first time we've gotten that signal. If you notice, all of these were kind of noise-based moves inside of a range. Now that we have a trend, we should be looking for a little dip. And if we get that dip, maybe, and the beautiful thing about this is that you don't have to worry about the moving average or anything. You're looking for a higher low to develop, looking for this to come down, and then watch for price to make a higher low. Or you could go down to a smaller time frame, like an hourly, to enter in. But this will be a really powerful tool. And maybe like Apple, it gives you a couple opportunities to get in this before it actually breaks out above 300. So this is something I definitely would be on the lookout for. Now, one thing I'll say is, if we're on the daily and this comes down and it comes down too hard and the RSI 20 comes down below 50, then I know that this is not the time frame I'm looking for. I would switch this and go to the weekly and look for the same pattern to happen on the weekly. We've got a lot of strength here, and this is why I like this setup, is because this is early in this time frame. 18-month is just turning up. If we got this to dip down to 50 and this to hold above, then we'd actually have a weekly signal. So do it on both time frames. Be on the lookout for it, but first priority would be to see if we get a actual signal to develop on the daily chart. So hopefully this helps, but use this RSI signal to really help you get in something that's showing a lot of strength, and you want to make sure you get an entry. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. I'm on the services page right now. You can see at the top, I've got the advanced trend and momentum courses individually priced for lifetime access. Plus you could buy them as a bundle at a discount. And then also the individual package has about 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video commentary each week for that package. Also, if you're new to this approach and you want to just learn more about it, you can start with the book I'm offering at a discount right now. Okay, before we get into the analysis, I do want to follow up on Tesla briefly on a few things. First of all, I get questions about this RSI look. You see how I have them separated? Now, if you just add the index, add 2 RSIs, you see how they're separate? But if you take the tab there and you just hold it up, and you see how that turned yellow, the RSI 20? Once you do that, you can overlay them. So I just wanted to make sure you knew how to do that. It's a really nice look having them together, I think. At least it saves space, and I think it looks pretty nice. So that's one thing. Second thing is, so what am I talking about on Tesla? If we go to the daily again, we're looking for this to start to drop. It's starting to tip down now as we move into the new day. Now, I mean, the RSI 5 can drop pretty fast, but what I like to do, so I'm not sitting there watching it, is I'm going to go to the alerts. All right. So if you go to your price alerts and, you've got your standard price alerts, but then you have the advanced alerts. And what I've done is I've created one for Tesla that just puts symbol. So you can copy this down. You can use it for any stock. You put in the symbol equal Tesla, and then I just have the daily. If you want to make it a weekly RSI, you change that to weekly and have RSI 5, make it less than 50. And I have it set up to text me. So if that's going to happen, if that thing drops down under 50, it would I would see it on in a text. All right. So I think that's pretty cool to have access to that. All right. Let's start getting into these markets. One of the things I want to cover, because clearly the QQQ is showing a lot of strength on a daily. Let me switch this back to the weekly. We can see that on a relative basis, we're back to a new high. And so what I've said is that we were looking for a 1, 2, 3. We never got that. We got the 1. We had them working up to the 2, but we never turned a 2 down. And now we're at a new high. So we basically have to start all over and draw in a new trend line and look for a new 1, 2, 3 to develop on the relative strength. I think it's really important when you're looking at the indexes that way. All right. But one of the things I wanted to point out is when we're looking at divergence. So when you have this strong move like this, and you have ADX making a really nice peak here, and then it makes a good peak here, and now you're looking at this and it's hitting a new high. Use the DI to help you determine whether you've got divergence. The moment this made a higher high in green DI, let's just zero in on that for a sec. So once we made a higher high here, we don't need the ADX to make a higher high above this prior peak. We just need to see green DI coming back and making higher high, and now it's doing it again. We know we're back into an expansion phase, all right? And the same thing with the red, as that's moving away to the downside and this is moving away to the upside, we know that the blue line is going to move higher. All right. So understand, go through one of my old lessons on ADX. I do one that's pretty lengthy that gets into a lot of detail, but just make sure you understand that once the green DI, the positive DI starts to move higher again, we don't have to necessarily be on pins and needles waiting for some kind of a divergence to develop. That's the main point I wanted to get across. The other thing I wanted to say is that since we've jetted away a little bit, first of all, we jetted away from the monthly, but then we found support this last time at the weekly. But now we're starting to jet away here. So now look at what's going on. We're respecting the 18-day, and we have a parallel line look here. As long as this keeps respecting the 18 and pulling back to it, this is kind of the controlling time frame. Now, if we don't pull back and we jet away, then we might have to go down to the hourly. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But that's kind of the way I'm playing this right now. Trend is up. Momentum is positive. We're looking for some kind of either a spike high or a breaking of the trend line or the 18, which is in control. Right now, it's the 18-day. All right, let's look at the IWM. Still missing a key component here, which is the relative line continues to drop. I personally think we need to get through 210. Now, if we can come back up through 205, there's signs of improvement because we do have a reverse divergence developing. So if we can come back up through 205, especially if we can get like a big green bar, that could tell us that we're on our way up to test that 210 and potentially break out. So that's the first thing I'd be watching for on that one. All right, let's look at XLY. I'm going to look at a few sectors. So first of all, look at what's going on a relative basis. We're starting to go, if we draw a trend line in, we're starting to see a little bit of improvement there, a little bit on the early side. But I wanted to point out, look, we have reverse divergence again, right at the 0 line with low ADX. And then we got big green bar, big green bar. I mean, those are the kinds of patterns I'm looking for when I get the setup on the weekly. I'm looking for signs of real buying to step up. That was good volume on this big green bar here. As the 18 was turning around, it was testing it and making it. So this actually looks pretty interesting. It probably needs a little bit of a pullback in the near term. Now, the two sectors I am watching to see if we get some rotation, especially if they decide to take some profits in tech, are XLF and XLI. And I'm going to show you why. So the report I do on Monday is showing that the composite charts, when I go through all of the stocks, there's a lot of stocks inside of the financials that are oversold, that are showing bearish trend and momentum. But when we get too many and we get oversold, we're looking for a reversal back to the upside. The thing is about the financials and the XLI, which are both in the same position, is the trends are all bullish. I mean, for the most part, three out of 4 stocks are still bullish. And so what we want is to start watching. And if you notice, we've got, again, a reverse divergence, and this time with strong ADX. So I'm on the lookout for the daily to create a big green bar to the upside, kind of like what we saw in that XLY, especially now that we've been in a little bit of a low ADX condition. See if you can't get a sign of real buying stepping in. Now, the same thing holds true for the XLI. Everything I just said, double bottom forming in price while we're making a lower high and a lower low. So that's a divergence, and the momentum's still pretty good here overall, but we need a big green bar to kind of kick things off, I think, on the daily chart. That's what I would be watching to see if we see any kind of rotation back in. Now, I wouldn't just jump into these based on their current position. I'm looking for signs of strength that suggest there might be some rotation into them. All right, let's look at some of the stocks where there were some requests that came in. So ZS, this is pretty intriguing. Look at the strength to the upside, and now we've pulled back and finding support at the 18-month. MACD is holding a signal line right at the 0 line, so that we've got a little bit of a pinch play developing. So what we need now is the weekly to show, I think, a little bit more strength, or at least consolidate a little bit more to get this 18 to turn around. The MACD is still below the 0 line, and we're still showing a little bit too much on the sell side. So I probably want to see a little bit of strength and then look to buy a pullback. I think we can be patient here, but this does have the makings of something that really could develop positively sometime over the next month or two. I'd keep it on my watch list, but I think we're on the early side, frankly. That's my thoughts on this right now. All right, BOAT. Really big green bar on the monthly, some pretty nice strength. So when I see strength, you can see it on the price action. You see these bars, there's gaps and big green bars, and we move up like that, but you can really see the ADX breaking out above all these levels after a low ADX condition. So I think now there's a lot of support underneath. And I don't like the fact that this is gapping today, but the underlying condition is showing improvement. All right. This doesn't look like a big, so the big problem I have with this is that it doesn't trade. The average volume on this is 27,000 shares a day. That's just really low. So from that standpoint, it actually bothers me more than the price trend. And that's when you get these big gaps like that. So, you know, if someone decides to sell, it just causes big gaps and big movements to the downside. The overall pattern actually looks pretty good. And right now we're operating off of a trigger 1. If this turns back up and takes out the trend line, based on the condition that it's in, it does look pretty good from that standpoint. Okay, so Baxter, we're looking at reversion trade. And I guess we're looking at this kind of big green bar that shows up back into support. So let me just see if this has the makings of something that would intrigue me. It doesn't really have that. it doesn't really show any signs. I would prefer, if I'm going to play a reversion trade, I really want to see divergence on the weekly chart, go down to the daily and see signs of slowing momentum on this time frame. And this is still really strong. And I know this looks like divergence. But it really is rallying up to the zero line, and price really isn't matching that rally. So even though it doesn't really qualify as a reverse divergence, it has that same feel to me. I would not be all that interested in this from a reversion trade. I mean, it might work, but just based on the way I look at the world, it doesn't really fall into any kind of a signal right now. Okay, so GH, I kind of like what's happening here. We got a little undercut. So we undercut this low, and then look at the big green bar that showed up. And now we're getting through the 18-month line with divergence. All right, we got a higher low in MACD. All right, now we're getting a pullback on the weekly chart with signs of strength. Look at the volume, look at the DI causing the ADX to move up, and look at how MACD is moving higher. This is a good stock. I like this one. This is a good pick, whoever brought this up. Now, we need an entry. So I think we're going to form some kind of what we'd want is actually a little move to the upside and then a move down and get an ABC, and then we can draw in our trend line like that as this moves down close to the zero line. Got a lot of strength on this time frame. Now, if that doesn't happen, we probably are going to need to have a little zigzag move like that and then play the higher low turn to the upside. So be on the lookout for some kind of a structural improvement, a higher high, higher low, higher low, higher high, or the potential for this to come in a little bit longer and form an opposing trend pattern, which is, of course, it's right out of my course, or in my book, with the zero line reversal and a strong momentum condition on the ADX. Okay, in terms of Dell, we got a little bit of a spike high here. See this spike that took place on the weekly? So I want to push away from that. We already had one bar and some sellers showed up. I don't think there's been enough time elapsed. We're not far enough away from that. These people are still a little too close to, I don't think they've had enough time to get out. And so I want to give them a little bit more time. The long-term trend looks fine, but the short-term pattern looks like there's just a little bit too much resistance in place. And then finally, let's look at the FSLR. Strong move to the upside, but the violence of the decline is bothering me. We got a spike reversal at 300, and then we've had a big red bar here. I think this is going to take a little bit of time. I do like the underlying conditions, good momentum conditions taking place, but the way it's coming in is suggesting to me that this is going to take more time. I think it might actually form a trading range and may take a couple months to set itself up. Thanks for watching today. If you have any stock requests, you can send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Also, my YouTube channel is called Invest Like a Pro. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.